A massive weekend down in Baton Rouge. Alabama coming up on top. Let's talk about it, guys. What a week of college football.
Welcome to the Pigskin Cafe, a podcast where Hampton, Chase, and Graham break down all things college football. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
They have to win this game.
There's a problem.
This one's tough.
We are back.
That's what my gut's telling me.
I genuinely could not believe
You
it.
don't live in the great state of Texas.
All right, big boy. Hold my sweet tea.
What are we doing?
That is a stat there, ladies and gentlemen.
What's going on, everybody? Hey, grateful for you tuning into another episode of the Pigskin Cafe, where this episode we get to talk about LSU versus Alabama, which, guys, we just said it feels good to hop on a friendly and happy podcast for once this season. A lot of head scratching, a lot of hair that's been pulled. So really excited to talk about a full and complete game by the Crimson Tide. But before I jump in, just want to invite you listeners. Again, we are just a bunch of guys who went to college together and love talking college football, specifically Alabama. And if that's you, if that's up your alley, we'd love for you to be a part of this family here. And if you just would like and subscribe on the video, it lets us know that what we're putting out there is getting traction. And we really do look at it before we start to record episodes just like this. So if you've got questions, or even as you're listening and liking, lets us know which direction to kind of steer these. So as we steer, let's move into the offensive side of the ball. Man, what if you just were to take a look back? I mean, think about how yesterday started. Think about where your mind was and where your heart was, and just thinking, man, this feels like a really bad matchup for Alabama. And then, moment of silence, we got the tribute to Ben Herbstreit, which there was not a dry eye in my household. Because, man, that was sad. We've got a golden retriever. But then it began to break down. I think that one of the big, aspects of this game was who was injured for LSU. And it's worth us go ahead and put that out to begin with, that we're not blind to that as we're doing this analysis. But Hampton, let's start with you talking about the offensive side of the ball. There was a lot of question marks. There was a lot of doubt on how this team was going to come out for the offensive side of the ball. Were they going to put the defense in a bad position? Were they going to go 3 and out? Were they going to turn the ball over? A lot of questions that I feel like got debunked for this game. Just everything seemed to go well. So Hampton, I want you just to talk a little bit more about that. Of how did this offensive performance end up as well as it did?
Chase, Graham, it's great to be on with you. Great to talk an Alabama victory that was resounding. And talking about resounding, be sure, like Chase said, subscribe. We're on our way to 150 subscribers. Go ahead, hit that subscribe button. But my mindset going in this game, I was worried. I picked Alabama to lose this game because I had PTSD from Tennessee. I had PTSD from games from last year. And I kind of felt like last night was going to be a little bit different. On the first drive, third play, it's third down. Jalen Milroe kind of mishandles the snap. It's not the best snap in the world. And he rolls out. He doesn't lose his composure. He hits Ryan Williams on the sideline and gets like a 15 to 20-yard gain. That right there kind of showed me, I wasn't fully bought in, but I'm like, this might be a little different than what we saw in Knoxville, Tennessee, where from the jump, it looked like Jalen Milroe was rattled. It looked like the entire offense and the team in its totality was succumbing to the pressures of the game, but also the environment. And they go down and they score on a 35 to 40-yard touchdown run from Jalen Milroe that was blocked beautifully. Absolutely beautifully. He read it well. And it was a little bit of a variation of something that Alabama's done all year in the option game. But this time, he kind of slow played the option, let the running back be kind of a lead blocker for him, and kind of just wormed his way through the hole, didn't even really get touched because Caden Proctor and Tyler Booker did a really good job of displacing the defenders. And I think it may have been a read, but I'm thinking more so that it was just a QB-designed run from the jump with the way that the running back kind of got out in front. And that drive kind of encompassed the whole game of Alabama off a bye week is a different animal. Kalen DeBoer and company deserve a ton of credit for the game plan that they came up with on defense, especially, and we'll get to that. But offensively, there was such a flow and a rhythm to everything that they were doing. And it felt like they knew coming into the game that we can win at the line of scrimmage. We can dominate LSU running the football. And that's absolutely what they did. I'm looking now. Alabama had 48 carries for 311 yards and 6 touchdowns on LSU. That's incredible. They haven't ran the ball that effectively all year. You saw a glimpse of it versus Missouri, but not to this level from quarter 1 to quarter 4. And I think it kind of speaks to a little bit of a change in philosophy from this Alabama staff. I think they knew after that Tennessee game, we've got to take a little more off Jalen Milroe's plate. We've got to be a team that runs the ball, that is physical, and that uses his legs, and then the pass can supplement that. And last night, they threw the ball 17 times. They didn't really have to challenge them vertically, even though there were a couple shots that Jalen Milroe just missed on, and I'm not critiquing him for that. That happens in games. Ryan Williams should have come down with one of them, even though it might have been a little bit out of reach. He should still come down with that ball, and then go ahead.
Do you feel? Does he usually wear gloves?
Yes.
On that play, he wasn't wearing gloves. Talk about that for a second.
Yeah, that great point by you. I think him, Jam Miller, and a couple other skill players, when the rain really started to come down, they all took their gloves off. I don't know if it helped them catch the ball better than having gloves on. I don't know if it was, a comfortability thing, but that was definitely, I think, for just a couple drives there when the rain got heavier and heavier. But, those are plays I can live with if, it's just a little bit overthrown on the one to him or the one to Emmanuel Henderson, even though, like I said, Ryan should have caught that other one. But Alabama never got away from the run. They never got into a pass-happy mode, and I think part of that is because they knew what they had. They knew by watching LSU that they could dominate the line of scrimmage, and one thing that just kind of chuckled me, of Jalen Milroe's 4 touchdowns, the third touchdown was a variation of the first touchdown as far as play design. Like, literally, they ran the about exact same play. And the fourth touchdown was a variation of the second touchdown, but it was to the other side. And I think that also spoke to LSU has a really difficult time defending option and mobile quarterbacks. Lenora Sellers ate them up, and they would have probably lost that game versus South Carolina if he had not gotten hurt. And then we saw what Marcel Reed did, and I thought that might have been just kind of a change in the game. They didn't really prepare for him. I think it's an inherent flaw with their defense because not only did they not touch him hardly at all on those touchdown runs, they were completely misaligned at times. From the second touchdown in particular, that kind of draw with Justice Haynes leading the way, their linebacker shot out to the edge. I think because the motion didn't even have an eye on the quarterback, and then there was nobody to fill. And it was kind of like that all night. So I think the biggest takeaway from offense, and again, we're going to get into a conversation later in the show about what does this mean going forward. But the offensive line was kind of the offensive line we've been wanting to see all year. They were dominant. I mean, I thought Booker played great. I thought Brailsford was 15 to 20 yards downfield, sustaining his block at times. I thought Jam Miller ran pretty well. Justice Haynes did all right, but really the main success on the ground came from Jalen Milroe. I thought he was sensational in the running game. And part of that, and, I know this is a conversation that's been had online, after the first touchdown was, Jalen Milroe was back healthy because he was clearly hurt the past 3 or 4 games. And we've said on the show, I think he was banged up, but everybody is banged up playing in the SEC. I think the difference was he was more decisive. And I think he was more decisive because every hole that he saw was open like Moses when Moses parted the Red Sea. I mean, literally, that was how open the gaps were. And so it's easy to be decisive when you're not really having to make much of a read. You just stick your foot in the ground and go, because the offensive line did their job, and LSU just clearly doesn't have the horses on D to compete with you. So I thought he played sensational. I thought that was maybe his best game of the year. Probably I'd give the edge to the Georgia game because I think he played a better defense by far. But I'll leave with this, and then we can kind of kick it to Graham. We've said on this show, and we've clearly defined what gives Jalen Milroe trouble. And I thought LSU, while they don't have the edge rushers, they don't have the defensive line of the caliber of a Tennessee or South Carolina, I thought they would be a little more aggressive in causing havoc and speeding up his internal clock. And they really didn't. They blitzed an extra guy and would bring 5 at times, but the one time they brought 6, he got sacked, which I'm like, well, of course he did, because that's really kind of what he struggles with, but it got negated because of a face mask penalty. I was really surprised with their game plan. I mean, they had 2 weeks to prepare, and I just thought they lacked in overall talent, but also just in a schematic approach to the game. But credit to Nick Sheridan, who walked down from his box like a boss with 2 minutes left in the game. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen that. That was great. Offensive line did great. Jalen Milroe was sensational, and what a performance by the Alabama offense.
Totally. Graham, I want to kind of, Hampton, you brought this up towards the end. And Graham, I want you to speak a little bit about the offense, but I really want you to maybe, if you could speak for just a second on LSU came into this game coming off of a bye. And it's not like when you play A&M and Wegman gets benched and then they bring in this Reed guy who is just completely different from what you prep for. I give a lot of grace for that. That's a hard turn to prep for.
Mm-hmm.
But just maybe speak a little bit more into LSU's defense and like more of just how they came into this game, because it felt like this would have been a game that they were going to get up for, be ready, be prepared. And like you mentioned, Hampton, there was just several layers to their performance that just were very unimpressive, very lackluster. Hampton, I'll let you go, but don't take the answer from Graham if that's cool.
No, I'm not. I just want to say, to further add to that, when Alabama's second team offensive line and running backs got in the game, they still ran the ball on them with great success. I thought Richard Young was fantastic, and he should be getting more carries with the first team. That was all I was going to add. Then Graham, take it away, brother.
Yeah, there was some part of it that didn't they didn't feel. I know they came probably excited to play, but it did not feel like as though they were prepared, which is just hard for me to wrap my mind around. So, Graham, what's your reaction to that of seeing an LSU team that came out and put on a defensive performance that was very lackluster against a good Alabama team?
Yeah, I just want to reference the podcast last week. Hampton and I talked about the prediction we had for Alabama and LSU, and unlike Hampton, I was right. I picked Alabama to win, and I think I had it at a touchdown or 10 points, something like that, as Alabama favorites, and obviously they blew that out of the water. I think that what we talked about on that podcast was briefly was that LSU was somewhat overrated. They hadn't really played a very difficult schedule. Look at obviously they lost to USC week 1. USC has not had the best year. Not they're terrible, but they haven't had the best year. They were, they almost lost to South Carolina. It was like every game that they won against a decent team was by like 3 points, 6 points. So they were used to playing really close games. And I think that as you look at it and you watch this game, that was kind of, that was just, not like blown out of proportion, but the talent difference and the skill difference and the coaching difference in this game was far and wide. You look at Alabama, we talked about it, and I talked about it specifically. What did Alabama need to do in order to win? They need to run the football. None of us in here are football coaches, but if I know that, if you know that, our listeners know that, their wives know that, then maybe they should try and stop Alabama from running the football. And LSU And just kind of to sum up what Brian Kelly said in his post-game press conference, people are going to wonder what they've been doing for 2 weeks. Like, really?
Wait, he said that for real?
He did say that. He did say that. I mean, similar to that. Not going to quote him, but that's what he said. He said that there's going to be fans that are going to question what we've been doing for 2 weeks. And so Alabama, I mean, obviously, kudos to them for having a great game plan. Really, I mean, very prepared. Seemed to know, or at least have a good idea of what LSU would do when faced with certain motions, in certain packages, in certain formations. But Alabama, it wasn't like that Jalen Milroe was like running on, like scrambling out of the pocket and then breaking big plays. These were designed runs or option runs. And Alabama was running all over LSU, and it wasn't even halftime. I was very convinced of Alabama's effort in this one, that their offense is capable of playing well when needed to, that they could play good teams on the road and still be able to succeed. I'm sure that you're probably listening and you're like, well, he just said LSU wasn't good, and now the LSU is a formidable opponent. Playing in Death Valley at nighttime is formidable if you even had a middle school team out there. I mean, you could put an average high school team out there, and with those fans, it would make a difference. I think that what was it the first play that Alabama had? Before the first play, Alabama had a false start.
Yeah.
I saw that and I was like, oh no, here it goes again.
Here we go.
See all over again. I was very impressed and very pleased with changing our cadence to the traditional NFL style. You're not going to be able to hear motion the leg, that tap the center. We're on the same page. And I think that helped tremendously. And it honestly gave Alabama at least some momentum because they had a little bit more control. They weren't trying to listen for the snap. They said, all right, center, snap it. All right, there you go. And so that really helped cut down on the penalties. And I think when you look at it, that was a big improvement for Alabama's game as well, because Alabama, one of the most penalized teams in the country, finally had a cleaner, pretty much clean game. I mean, they had some penalties here and there, but fairly clean. Man, I think for Alabama's offense, Nick Sheridan, kudos to you. Very impressive. But, man, LSU's defense, plagued with injuries for sure. They didn't seem to know, they didn't know what to do. They were ill prepared. Their defense coordinator Blake Baker, I'm pretty sure if he's not the highest paid coordinator in the country, he's close. Having to lure him from Missouri last year. I mean, I think that even Brian Kelly, kind of towards the end of the game when Alabama was running the ball, you could see like the camera would pan to both of them. And they were talking just kind of like, man, we didn't know what they're saying. But they were having a conversation as almost like they were confused as to what had happened. Like they weren't really sure what just went down, and there wasn't much fire in Brian Kelly's voice, at least getting after Blake Baker. He was getting after a larger African American coach, but I don't know what he does. So
Hey, and that coach was giving it back to him too.
Yeah, and so I think for Brian Kelly, for Blake Baker, for LSU, that kind of sums up the game. They got hit, and they didn't know what hit them, and I think that's kudos to Alabama's offense. I think that's all you got to say. Very impressed that Alabama can line up and say, all right, we're going to run it with the quarterback, and we do. And we continue to do it, and it worked, and it worked, and it worked. All the credit to Alabama. So I guess the last kind of thing I'll say about that, and then I'm sure we can move on, because I'm sure they're tired about listening to Alabama running the ball. But Hampton, you said it. The offensive line had a magnificent game. They were winning blocks. They were making holes. And credit to guys like Justice Haynes, like Jam Miller, actually being unselfish and actually going in there to block when their number wasn't called. I think that was that was a big thing too. I think we've seen, not necessarily Alabama-wise, but just college football trend recently has been a lot more selfish football, and it's nice to see guys that are still willing to like, hey, if my number's not called, I'm gonna strap up for whoever's is. I think that running backs block like that, receivers block fairly well, especially on those big runs. Very impressed. That's all I'll say. Really impressed.
And guys, maybe this is a good way to transition. We beat this team so bad, and it was so unexpected. Let me just kind of get like a one word answer on this. Do you feel as though LSU was truly prepared for that game? Hampton, I can tell you're thinking. Graham, what would you veer more towards? How about this? I'll put it on a scale. How about this? On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being absolutely prepared, 0 being we thought we were good, didn't have to practice hard. Where would you kind of put it?
Repeat the scale. What was 1 and what was 10?
10 is absolutely prepared. 0 is not prepared at all, thinking you didn't have to practice kind of.
No,
kind of
I'd say probably a 2.5. I mean, wow. My answer is going to be no. I think that we talked about it on the pod last week. Hampton and I did, and LSU was not. I mean, schematically, they don't run the ball very much on offense. They are very pass heavy, and so what did Alabama need to do is run the ball and control like time, because when you run the ball, it doesn't matter how long you sit down, you still have that momentum. But when you're throwing the ball, as your arm gets colder, as you spend easy, as you spend more time on the bench, kind of cooling down, that takes away the momentum. That takes some of the air out of the tank. And I think that was a big deal too. I think that LSU's offense was not nearly as prepared either. So
I have no idea where this is coming from.
All right.
My answer simply is no. I didn't think they were on offense or defense.
I'll answer quickly, and then we can go to the defense. I think I'd give it like a 5. I'm not going to say that they weren't prepared, because I think Blake Baker's a good DC, and I have a hard time believing that they just didn't completely prepare for this game and they weren't fully bought in. I think it's an inherent issue with some of the personnel that they have on that team. And it may be some of it scheme related and how it's being taught, because this is 3 separate instances of you playing a super mobile quarterback and them giving you the same exact issues.
Yeah.
So I think it's both scheme and not being confident in what you're supposed to do, and also not having the horses. And I think that is the most surprising thing about LSU. They do not have, for a team that is built on defense traditionally for the past 20 or so years, they don't have a guy on that unit that I'm like, yeah, that dude's a superstar, which is just shocking. And part of that is Alabama, like you said, Grant, they did a good job of controlling the clock, being efficient, which we haven't said that all year. And they also controlled third down. They were fantastic on third down.
It's good analysis, fellas. Let's move on to the defense. And I'm going to ask it like this. What is your highlight of the defensive side of the ball? So, Graham, if you don't mind, I'll start with you. Just thinking about the whole defensive scheme, and really, I don't even want to focus on that touchdown they scored at the end. I loved the fact that we're like, oh, y'all want to throw the ball? We were sending the house.
And hey, credit Nussmeier
and Lacey. That was a great throw and catch. Really got no problem with that. So outside of that, though, Graham, I mean, the game was dominated by Alabama, able to get them off the field. So just what was your highlight of the defensive performance?
Yeah, my favorite play was, I'm pretty sure it was Q-Rob with the interception at the goal line. It was Q-Rob, wasn't it?
No, Deontay Lawson.
Sorry. Deontay Lawson. Deontay Lawson coming off of, they were running like, 2 slants from the same side, coming off of that one receiver, moving to the next one. And the LSU schemed it up almost perfectly. They had that like 6-7 tight end lined up inside. So anticipate that Deontay Lawson would move with him. And what did he do? As soon as he was out of that zone, he threw him off and got to the next guy. The receiver was open. It was a good play. But Deontay Lawson moved off of that one block and was there. And it was just such a beautiful defensive play because you knew that, well, LSU knew what Alabama was going to do. They knew that, man covers, those guys were going to bite down, and that and they didn't anticipate that Deontay Lawson would be able to move off of one receiver to the next in that amount of time. And I mean, Nussmeier hit him in the chest. I mean, it was such a beautiful play, and it was one of those things that, like, that was like the final blow that, okay, LSU was going all night. I apologize to Deontay Lawson for me spending the last like 12 hours at least giving Q-Rob credit for that. But Deontay Lawson, a great interception. But to me, I think the difference was that it wasn't a magnificent play, but it was like you've seen growth this season, moving from, okay, we anticipate this is what's going to happen. I've got to move off of this guy because this is my zone. I've got to stay here if he goes out of my zone. And I think that was the best play for me. Alabama also sent in the house almost every – I mean, that lining up like that almost every play, at least the second half, really gave LSU fits because they didn't know if Alabama was bringing everybody, if they were only bringing 4, if they're bringing 6, what 6 were they bringing? And so, especially on those third and long, third and 15, we saw it several times, or second and 15, first and 20, where LSU would, audible out of a, downfield pass and send a running back in motion, and it'd be, like I said, it'd be blanking 15 or blanking 20, and we'd stop them at 5 yards. And it's like we knew, okay, we're not going to let them throw it down the field on us. And so I was very impressed by that. We talked about Kane Womack last week and talked about the scheme wise, and I thought the scheme really came to play, and really, like, this was just the perfect matchup for the scheme as well. So credit the defense, credit Deontay Lawson. If I gave a player of the week, Milroe deserves it, obviously, but Deontay Lawson did a good game too.
I've heard a lot of people say that Deontay Lawson did too much outside of that, that he played pretty good, but that Jahad Campbell played phenomenal.
Yeah.
But yeah. Graham, it's your game ball. Give it to whoever you want to,
Correct. Hey.
So in Hampton, the next question for you is the same as Graham, along the lines of why you would give Ray Hubbard the game ball for your analysis.
Let me tell you something. Before I get to my guy Bray, to add on to what Graham said about that Deontay Lawson pick, that pick happened in practice. That was a preparation pick because Lawson said after the game, they ran that exact same play in practice, and he did the same thing in practice. He shifted to that other receiver and then came back and picked off Austin Mack in practice. So that is where preparation meets on-field play, and he was fantastic in the game. You mentioned Jahad Campbell. Jahad Campbell was all over the dadgum place. Played like a man possessed, not only as an off-ball linebacker going sideline to sideline, but even utilizing him as a pass rusher. I mean, that fumble he got was really, really big. It came at a critical point in the game when Alabama could have gotten a touchdown or gotten a field goal to put more points on the board and had a couple, honestly, procedural penalties that really killed them. They give the ball back to LSU, and then immediately the next play, he forces a fumble. I mean, that was just huge. I thought he was fantastic. I thought the story of the game, LSU is supposed to have one of the best offensive lines in the sport, and the Alabama defensive line dominated them. Like, not only were they getting pressure when they would send extra guys, and like you said, lining people up at the line, sometimes sending everybody, sometimes dropping guys in coverage, doing stunts and twists and games up front. But they got pressure with 4 a good bit in that game. I thought LT Overton, Q-Rob both did well. James Smith, I've been talking about him all year. He flashed multiple times during that game. There was one sack in particular where Tim Keenan freaking drove the left guard back in the quarterback, and then Jahad Campbell came and got the sack. I mean, this defense, guys, and this is a story we've talked about on this show since the Vanderbilt game. They have gotten better and better and better and better. And what they continue to do is get turnovers. They got 3 again in this game. They got 2 picks and a fumble off of Garrett Nussmeier. And one thing that we said in the preview show, Graham, if you pressure Garrett, he's going to give you a couple. And he was itching to do it because he kept throwing off that back foot. And eventually that is going to get you in trouble. And I think Garrett Nussmeier is a very talented quarterback. He's a very gifted thrower of the football, but he can be fooled. And I think Alabama did that a few times in the game where, again, you show him one thing at the pre-snap and then post-snap you shift to something else. And I think that really caused some confusion for him because I think in a lot of ways he predetermines where he's going to go with the ball, like that touchdown that Deontay Austin took away by picking the ball off. So I thought the defense was fantastic. I thought overall the team, and again, you've got to give credit to the coaching staff for, I think after Tennessee, there was a little bit of a reset on the whole program from, guys, what we're doing right now as far as preparation, as far as attention to detail, it's not good enough. And I think there was a heightened level of intensity in this game. I mean, did you notice when the team made a play, especially defensively, there wasn't any trash talking. There wasn't anybody, standing over a guy and showboating. No, it was business-like. It felt like old Alabama, and they played hard. They were more physical. I mean, the mismatch in physicality was so glaring to watch, and it's such a contrast from what we saw in the Vanderbilt game. I mean, we talked about on the show, that is what irritated us so much, is that you can tell when a team is bringing it from an intensity level, and Alabama was not in that game, and it's gotten better and better, especially from that side of the ball. And you got to give credit to Kane LaMichael Womack. That brother, the dark knight of defense, wearing that all black because it was LSU's funeral, he has got that unit to respond since the Vanderbilt game, and they're getting more comfortable in the scheme, and they're continuing to force turnovers. And I think down the stretch for Alabama, if they keep building, they're going to be they're a scary unit now, but they're going to be even better down the road. And I'll save the best for last. Bray Hubbard is playing some dadgum good football, man. He knows where to be. He's ultra physical, and he's started 2 games and has 2 interceptions. He just has a knack for playing the game. Like, I am I'm not like overblowing it. He's a dang good football player. And honestly, this might be a hot take. I think he's playing better than Keon Sabb was when he got hurt. I thought Keon Sabb played really well against Tennessee, but in run support, he's definitely been better than Keon Sabb. So that side of the ball, every member of that unit deserves a game ball. I thought they were absolutely outstanding, and I'm excited to see where they go from here.
I like it. I had that thought, Hampton. I was trying to remember whose spot that Hubbard took.
Yeah.
Just because he's been playing so well, and I was thinking, hey, if they get healthy, I mean, you have a real conversation of this dude's kind of earned his place.
Well, another thing I want to add real quick that I thought was an interesting wrinkle, Devontae Smith got hurt again. Bless his heart, that dude cannot stay healthy. Like, my goodness, that's the 3rd or 4th time he's gotten hurt this year. But against Tennessee, King Mack came and played in his place. And I think a lot of the big plays in the second half against Tennessee were because of him. This game, they put Deshaun Jones, the transfer from Wake Forest. He came in and played that Husky position. And I thought played much, much better than King Mack. I thought that was a good job by the coaching staff to give him an opportunity and kind of shift him from an outside corner role into that Husky position.
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting to see them rotate those guys back there so that in these moments, it feels like they're getting guys good experience, but they're also figuring out who plugs and play really in this new defense. I think that even, they talked about when they hired Womack, they talked about that Jahad Campbell had been playing the wrong position the whole time. There's just several guys that just scheme-wise, it's just like, hey, they'd be great in a different scheme. And then when he came, they're like, hey, this will bode well for them. So, fellas, I do want to just end this podcast by let's land the plane on just what were the implications of this game. And I'll just say what's obvious so that you guys don't have to say it. one thing that has been awesome about expanding the playoff, no matter how you think or feel, we haven't seen it yet, but one of the positive things we've already felt is that game really did matter. And you could I've heard people explain it another way, saying, "Oh, if you lose, you're still some way that you get in. If you win, you still got to win out." Like, I get that, but you're losing what people, like, the spirit of what people are saying, that game really did matter. And so obviously Alabama wins. And guys, that I think that what was crazy about the game was not just simply that Alabama beat LSU, but that Georgia got absolutely spanked by Ole Miss. So I want to talk just quickly about that and just the implications as the SEC is starting to round off. We've got Georgia playing Tennessee next weekend, isn't that right? And then we've got Texas and Texas A&M. We've got a lot of matchups still to be played, but we could end this with a lot of teams at 10-2. So,
Yeah.
Hampton, with all that being said, you put that all into a bowl. What do you make of all that? Where do you think we go, and how is all this shaking up?
Yeah. I want to hit it from the Alabama perspective and then talk about the SEC in its totality, because I think it is so fascinating, because I remember we had this conversation in our group meet a few weeks back, and there was a certain person that we love dearly who thought it was just going to be chalk and that it was going to be clearly Georgia was not going to lose another game and it was just going to all be evened out and simple. It has been anything but that. There have been so many big wrenches thrown into this whole thing that just make it for a really interesting last 3 games of the year. But from an Alabama perspective, now Atlanta is in play for you. Some things have to fall your way, but if you win out, there's a chance that you might play for the SEC championship, which is crazy to think about.
Which I did bring up a possibility, and you guys said, no, there's no way that Alabama plays in. Let's talk about all the other teams.
I did not say that. Somebody else said that. I did not say that. I said the probability wasn't very high, but that there was still a chance.
Proud of me in that moment, sticking up for the Tide.
But yeah, Preston did not have much faith in that happening. But I didn't have much faith in it happening, but still thought it could. I think for Alabama, what you can take from this game for playoff implication, 3 things. Number 1, I think the defense is clearly rounding into form, and we've said that since Vanderbilt. If they keep progressing, they're going to be able to keep Alabama in almost any game that they play. I think that is a very encouraging sign. Number 2, when you get into a playoff and you have longer lengths of time between games, that's advantage Alabama, because this staff has shown what they can do when they have extra preparation. And really, in Kalen DeBoer's entire career, he has shown that after a bye and with an extra week to prepare, his teams usually had the better game plan, are more prepared, and come out and execute really well. Number 3, I think offensively you can be encouraged by the strides that have been made in the running game. But I don't think some of the flaws that you saw against South Carolina and Tennessee and even South Florida to an extent, teams that played Alabama a certain way and teams that had elite defensive line and edge rushers that could pressure Jalen Milroe, the worries against teams like that are not gone. I would just say that. I think there are still some inherent issues with the offense when it comes to teams like that. But I don't think there's a team on the rest of Alabama's schedule, save maybe Oklahoma has a good defense that's very aggressive and attacking. And as bad as Auburn has been from a record perspective, their defense has been good all year. They really have, especially their D-line. Keldrick Falk has turned into a really, really impressive player. They can stress Alabama in the ways that we kind of talked about on the show from an offensive perspective. So those are my 3 main takeaways from Alabama. SEC as a whole, I can't believe that Ole Miss dominated. We were talking pre-show. I can't believe that Ole Miss dominated Georgia to the level that they did Saturday in Oxford. From the jump, really. Even I know Georgia got up 7-0, and I think a lot of people thought because Jackson Dart got hurt that the game was over, but Austin Simmons comes in, leads them right down for a touchdown, and Georgia couldn't do anything offensively. I think there are fundamental flaws on that team from an offensive perspective, and I think defensively they do not generate enough consistent pass rush to be as lethal as they have been in the past. Against Texas, Mykel Williams and Jalen Walker were demons on the edge. That's kind of been an outlier for them. They're just not as solid on that side of the ball as they have been in years past. I think they're very gettable. They still may get in the playoff, but I don't expect them to win it with the offensive issues they've had, mainly Carson Beck turned the ball over, but also their defense just hasn't been up to par. I think if you look at Texas, they're still looking good. Again, that Florida game, you can't take much from that because Florida was playing with a mash unit out there. Texas A&M gets a bye week. And South Carolina, man, they've got 3 losses in the SEC, but they're going to be I would not want to play them down the stretch right now. They went into Nashville after a big win, took care of business against Vanderbilt, and they're a team that is peaking at the right time. So it's going to be really interesting with Georgia playing Tennessee. You mentioned A&M and Texas. Those are 2 big matchups down the stretch. And it's just going to be fascinating to see how it all plays out and who ends up in Atlanta.
Come on. I love it. Graham, as you think about just what we talked about, Alabama's performance here, big game, they take care of business. Just what do you think are the implications for Alabama and the implications for the SEC at large?
Yeah, I think they're very, they're tied together, definitely. I think that after watching Alabama lose to Vanderbilt and Tennessee, I would have had zero confidence that there'd be any chance, any possibility that we would be able to make the SEC championship game. Obviously, some things have to happen in our favor for that to take place. But after watching them play LSU, like I said, I'm convinced that this Alabama team has the at least potential to win an SEC championship. Like, if Alabama made that game, I would at least feel confident that they could win. Whereas after the Vanderbilt loss, after them playing Tennessee, after them playing South Carolina too, I was not convinced that was an SEC championship caliber team, and arguably a college football playoff team. I think for Alabama's implications, obviously some momentum that's being built there. You get a little bit of a easier matchup, cupcake game against Mercer this upcoming week. Then you travel to Oklahoma, then end out the season at home against Auburn. I think that the game in Oklahoma will be a true test for Alabama. This Oklahoma team is, not especially great. They've lost a good amount of games, but they've played most everybody close. Most everybody, not everybody, most everybody close, which is a tough opponent and makes Alabama at least know they have to show up their first time traveling to Norman. I think that for the implications of the SEC, you've got the biggest question mark that probably ever exists in the SEC. You've got, 4-6 teams, arguably, that could make the SEC championship game. And if any of them did, you would not be surprised or shocked by. It'll come down to, obviously, Georgia, Tennessee this upcoming week, and A&M, Texas to close out the year. To just really see what else is going to have to take place. But implications for the SEC, you've got a lot of dogs in the fight, and that at least is worth something. We'll say something about the college football playoff. With them expanding it to 12, obviously that's going to give SEC several bids. It's going to give the Big Ten several bids this year. But the conversation is not going to be about, did they leave out a national championship team? The question is going to be, well, who got snubbed? And it's like, okay, well, they lost 2 games, they lost 3 games, so be it. So I think for college football implications, I was a fan of expanding the playoff, and I think that a year like this is the reason why, because you have teams like Georgia. If Georgia figures it out, they're the best team in the country. Alabama has definitely seen its highs and lows this year. Outside of Oregon, Indiana, BYU, every other team in the country has shown that they're beatable. And when you look at the schedule for Indiana, when you look at the schedule for BYU and you look at the schedule for Oregon, they've still got some tests ahead of them. So you see, you could there's a possibility where the college football playoff is made up of only teams that have somewhat of a loss, which makes the playoff expanding a little bit better. Yeah, I know we're not done with college football. It's been a great year to watch. It really has been. There's so many teams that have been in the fight every single week. I'm just glad we get to be a part of the ride.
Love it.
Beautiful.
I'll make a bold prediction and say, or Hampton, go ahead.
No, you go for it, and then I've got 4 quick hits, and then I'm done.
All right.
It was 3, but then I thought of another.
Yes, I'll take us into part 2 of the pod. I'll make a bold take and say, fellas, you might be looking at a Alabama getting host playoff game. I'm just going to make a bold prediction and say that everything just falls in order like it does. It seems like every time this year, Bama seems to need some help and always seems to get it. And we'll see if Caleb Bohr has that. But wouldn't that be crazy is that we went from, losing 2 games that probably shouldn't have lost to, wow, we're hosting a home game because we won the SEC championship. So with that, Hampton, I'm not sure if you're going to top that, but would love to hear your 4 points, and then I'll get us out of here.
I don't think I can top that, but that would be so electric. Quick question before I get into my points. Would you rather Alabama win an SEC championship and have to play an extra game, or would you rather them not get to Atlanta, have another week to rest, and host a home playoff game? Chase, Hurts, and Graham.
Oh, I was just going to ask, don't they get a bye if they win the SEC championship and get the home bid?
Yes, they do.
So they wouldn't get a bye if they didn't win the SEC championship.
Correct. No, their bye would be technically not having to play the SEC championship. So you kind of get a bye either way. Yeah.
I think that I would kind of take the guaranteed points in a sense, and I would say, give me the win in the SEC championship with the home game and like a literal bye rather than not having to play, getting it, but then you're playing someone more in line with right now. They've got us at Texas, like having to play somebody like that rather than maybe getting to play like a Boise State to begin with. Because I think Boise State's had a great year, but those Jimmies and Joes don't match up. I think that it's a one-trick pony who is a fantastic pony. But that's kind of how I would hash it out. Graham, do you agree with me, or would you spin it in any different way?
Well, the one situation where it would definitely be unfortunate is if you made the SEC championship game, had to play it, then lost, then didn't get a bye the week after that, or like the first week of the playoff. If it's me, I'd rather win that SEC championship and get the week off, knowing you're guaranteed a top 4 seed. I think that'd be ideal. But we can't predict it. But I at this point, and the way the season has gone with ups and downs, if we make the college football playoff, I'm gonna be ecstatic either way.
Love it.
And I should have phrased the question better and just asked, would you rather get to the SEC championship, not win it? Because I agree with you both. If you win it, I would rather have the bye, and then you're playing. You let teams 5 through 12 knock each other out, and then you play, at a neutral site somewhere. But I should have phrased it that way. But points.
Sorry, I was just going to mention that if I were to answer that question, I don't think you want to play in the SEC championship. Why would you want to play against like a Tennessee, an A&M,
risk losing,
playing against like a juggernaut of a team? When, like I said, who's the Big Ten champion going to be? Ohio State, who has looked vulnerable, but I think that that's what's strange about this. And I saw the SEC or the playoff commissioner, somebody saying basically they didn't want to punish people for playing in the SEC championship and losing, like playing in a championship game and losing. But I think at some point we just got to get rid of them. I don't know what what are we trying to prove other than the automatic bid? I get like why they're there, but it does not seem. It seems like too much of a money grab at this point. There's not much. There's so many cons versus only a couple of pros, and I think that you really need to get rid of it when if you play in it, it can hurt you a lot more than if you don't play in it at all and still get in. So Hampton, take us to your 4 points.
You got to have a greater incentive for the teams playing in it to make it viable. I totally agree with you. 4 quick points.
Like you said, to lose that game and have to turn around and play again, that just doesn't feel fair. That feels Like what kind of they let you in, but you've got to prep for a whole new opponent coming off a loss. That's just not enough. Not enough meat on that bone for me.
Or again, like you said, if you lose and then you don't get into the playoff at all because you have 2 losses and then you get your third, I mean that would suck, and that to me that's not very fair. You told Graham about the need for a playoff this year, and I wholeheartedly agree. This is the perfect year of why the playoff need to be expanded. I was against it, but because of the parity and the transfer portal and NIL and the teams are more even, I think you need it. The point I wanted to make was I've seen so many people say that the parity in college football this year is because the playoff has expanded. I totally disagree with that. I think it is a result of primarily the portal followed by NIL, evening teams out. There's not as much depth on a Georgia, on an Alabama, on an Ohio State. And I think that is why there's been so many upsets and so many intriguing matchups week in and week out, mainly because of that. Number 2, we talked about Ole Miss. Ole Miss is a team that is probably, if they take care of business, going to sneak in the playoff. They're going to be a team no one wants to play. I think they are going to be kind of a dark horse in the playoff with how their offense is kind of starting to get it figured out, and their defense has been solid all year. And mind you not, they did that yesterday without 2 of their better offensive players in Henry Parrish and Trey Harris. So that makes it even more impressive. Point number 3, thank goodness Miami finally lost the game yesterday.
Yes.
They had been playing with fire all year long, and it was about time that it came and bit them in the butt because their defense is an atrocity. Ramblin' Wreck, Georgia Tech, shout out Brent Key, shout out Haynes King. Big win for them. I'm glad to see Miami finally has a loss on their resume because they're going to be a team that gets in the playoff and they're going to be fun to watch. But I think ultimately they're not going to go far because their defense is just sugar water at this point. Number 4, best story in college football this year, and honestly, I don't think it's getting enough love. Deion Sanders in Colorado, they are 7-2 right now. And man, they've got a chance to get in that Big 12 championship. And I'm telling you, if they get in the playoff, they are not going to be an easy out because their offense is just absolute dynamite, absolute must-see TV because of Shador, Travis, Shepard, Webster. I mean, they've got so many Horn. They've got so many dudes on that offense that the coaching job he has done there this year is incredible. And I mentioned it last week, and I'll end with this. There are Auburn fans who are giving Hugh Freeze a pass for this year and saying he needs to get his guys in. Colorado was in a much worse shape than Auburn was, and look where Deion has them in year 2. And I'll rest my case with that. Those are just 4 things that I thought need to be shared before we got out of here on this edition of the Pigskin Cafe. Enjoyed it as always, fellas.
Yeah, Hampton, thank you for your Fab 4 there at the end.
Yeah.
Which, again, dude, there's so much. This was what's so fun about this sport is there are so many headlines and so many games, and they're all coming to the end. There's people who've had great seasons. Like I said, I mean, really, Deion and Colorado have come on towards the end. They're going to basically fly in under the radar, and all of a sudden they're going to be in a place where it's like, oh, my goodness. And they're a fun team to watch, too. I don't know if you guys watched any of that game yesterday, but
very fun.
Hey, again, we always appreciate you listening. If you're taking time to listen to this podcast, like I say every week, this would be a phone call if it wasn't a podcast. That's how much we love ball. And if that fits you, if that's like you, we'd love for you to be a part of this family. So subscribe, like the channel. We've got socials too. We've got Instagram, TikTok, you name it, we got it. And so we'd love for you to follow us there. Keep up with us. Share this podcast with a friend. And again, Pigskin Cafe. We're going to be closed for now. But until next week, when Bama takes on the Fighting Bears of Mercer, the juggernaut of the South. We'll see you next time, folks. Chew on that.